the Quran, Surah 82, Al-Infitar, the Cleaving. When the sky splits open, and when the stars fall away, and when the seas burst forth, and when the graves spill out, then each soul will know what it has sent forth or left behind. O humanity, what has emboldened you against your Lord, the most generous, who created you, fashioned you, and perfected your design, molding you in whatever form he willed? But no, in fact, you deny the final judgment, while you were certainly observed by vigilant, honourable angels recording everything. They know whatever you do. Indeed, the virtuous will be in bliss, and the wicked will be in hell, burning in it on Judgment Day, and they will have no escape from it. What will make you realize what Judgment Day is? Again, what will make you realize what Judgment Day is? It is the day no soul will be of any benefit to another whatsoever, for all authority on that day belongs to Allah entirely. And now the Arabic, as recited by Saad El-Ghamdi.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا السماء انفطرت وإذا الكواكب انتثرت وإذا البحار فجرت وإذا القبور بعثرت علمت نفس ما قدمت وأخرت يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم الذي خلقك فسواك فعدلك في أي صورة ما شاء ركبك كلا بل تكذبون بالدين وإن عليكم لحافظين كراما كاتبين يعلمون ما تفعلون إن الأبرار لفي نعيم وإن الفجار لفي جحيم يصلونها يوم الدين وما هم عنها بغائبين وما أدراك ما يوم الدين ثم ما أدراك ما يوم الدين يوم لا تملك نفس لنفس شيئا والأمر يومئذ لله.
When I was a child, I can't remember when exactly, I'd estimate 6 to 8 years old, I used to have occasional panic attacks, sort of. Not panic attacks in the clinical certain sense, and maybe not in any sense. I just don't know how else to describe this feeling. It's like waterfalls are pouring into your head for several minutes, and pressure is building from the outside, kind of like a submarine diving way too deep into the ocean. And then your body goes into this panicky fear response. I think that's what it is, at least. Like you would react similar to a way if you were trapped in a cave or in some kind of crazy claustrophobic situation. And you shake your head and jump around and you move from place to place in this quick, jittery motion. But you can't actually free yourself physically from that state that you're in. So you just have to ride out the brain impulse or whatever impulse that was and just wait until it ended. And why did this happen? What could bring such an extreme response? What could cause this kind of a panic in such a small child? A child who is otherwise healthy, a child who has never known abuse, a child who has not experienced physical trauma. Well, I think in many ways it was Ayat 16 of Surah 82 of the Quran. They will have no escape from it. That's really, really serious stuff, and it's something that you should reflect on. Now, not that I knew any of this at the time. I'm talking about the concepts, not the actual words. To 6 or 8 me, if you said the word Islam or Quran to me at the time, I wouldn't have any idea what that was. But I was experiencing the same worldview being expressed in this surah and in Christianity and later reinforced in Islam. This idea that you are you and there is no escape from being you. There's no getting out of this. You are you forever. And death is not an option. You will live forever, and you will do it only as you. From a certain perspective, that can be overwhelming, and it can be scary. And that's before you even consider the possible downsides to this eternal life, you might call it. At the time, I was panicking at the mere concept of eternity. I wasn't even thinking about hell. That's a whole different later panic. But now, given the type of person who listens to this show, and the people who listen to shows like this in general, I'm sure there are many similar stories out there. I wouldn't be surprised if there are many other people this has happened to. I'd love to hear them. And one of the great mysteries of our lives is, why does it seem like I'm the only one who sees this? Now, we're not, of course, but often it can seem that way because people like us are not the majority. And I don't think we ever have been the majority, not even close. Why, people like us, why are we thinking about these things, the thoughts that are of ultimate importance? Because you can't get any more important than eternity. That's what makes it eternity. There's no number larger than infinity. Now, why do we think about this all the time and panic about it sometimes, when most people in the world seem completely content just staring at the ground until they die? We ask, why don't they look up? Are they afraid to look up? Are they even remotely curious about what they might see if they looked up? Now, if you can identify with this feeling, that might be a small dose of what Muhammad may have been experiencing at the time when all of this was going on, and what this surah is trying to accomplish, to jar people out of their earthly stupor, to break through the fog of blissful ignorance that keeps people solidly anchored only to this physical world and its immediate surroundings, to make them look up. That's why this surah starts the way it does. The first 4 lines here are visuals meant to shake people out of the physical world, or at least take their minds out of it, by offering a scenario where it is just no longer recognizable. The world, the physical world, is not recognizable anymore. When the sky rips apart, you always thought it would be there, right? It's the sky. What happens when it's not? When the stars scatter away, you're used to seeing black and stars in the night sky. You're used to being part of a stable, predictable universe. What if that goes away? When the seas are no longer limited to the normal places, when water overtakes the land, you're used to being a land mammal. That's what we are. What happens when there's only water? And when the graves are turned over, you're used to the dead being dead. So what happens when they're not? You are used to buried things staying buried. What happens when they are brought back to the surface? When you will realize all the things you ignored during your life on Earth. and have to confront the fact that you will be judged on your life. This surah has always been a favorite of mine. This sort of blunt force imagery to make people face their true place in the universe. A reminder that people are not in charge. God is in charge. And you cannot ignore God forever. Even with all the numbing strategies, all the rationalizations, all the excuses, they simply aren't going to work when the Earth and the entire universe are being scattered and ripped apart. And then, with this physical jolt, the reality of the moral world suddenly comes into view. As line 5 says, then each soul will know what it has sent forth or left behind. In other words, you will now see what you have done and what you have failed to do. The rest of the surah attempts to explain Judgment Day. It's actually very standard Quranic language by this point. Just act as if God is watching you, because God is watching you, and you will be called to account for everything that happens. And as an individual, remember, this is only as an individual will you be called to account. No one else can help you. It is God, your record, and you. Like line 19, it is the day no soul will be of any benefit to another whatsoever, for all authority on that day belongs to Allah entirely. It will just be you and eternity and the most powerful force in the universe. So, yeah, when you really think about it, some panic might be warranted, or at least some consideration to this inevitable day, and respect to the master of that day. But in reality, it doesn't tend to work out that way, does it? Now, Ayat 9 here specifically notes that, but you deny the final judgment. Why? Well, the Quran doesn't give a specific reason for why people do this, but general observation can help me give you some reasons that are probably implied here. I have noticed many people, I actually notice these things because I see them in myself. Some people, and sometimes me, we just like the moral autonomy and the unaccountable life that comes with denying God. Some believe the judgment won't come because it's a bunch of ancient fairy tales told by pathetic individuals who can't hack it in the real world. See Surah 83 for how that works out for them. And another one that's more common, maybe the most common, is not a conscious denial, but a tendency to put all of this to the back of the mind rather than to the front of the mind. Now, I would certainly be in this category sometimes. Just think of the isolated times you put God on the back burner. Usually when you really, really want to do something that you know dang well God does not want you to do. This tendency to leave the good things of God's design and decide to crawl back into the stinking cesspool of sin for a little bit. We do it. It happens. Christians call this nature concupiscence, original sin. Muslims call it something else, but the human phenomenon is not unique to any religion. That this happens. But the faithful do eventually go back. They feel the divine presence, either because you know you are being recorded or because your conscience is recording this situation itself. Now, that seems to work better, by the way. I've hit a brick wall the last few years trying to use Santa Claus, for example, to make my daughter behave, out of fear of not getting presents. Now, that's not very effective, I found, at least on many people, and certainly people like her. But teaching her right and wrong and letting her conscience be Santa Claus, that has proven to be far more effective. Now, I do want to go back to the beginning for a few more points on this surah. mainly having to do with the title phrase and the first line. That may have slid by. Where's the cleaving? What is this? The title, Al-Infitar, the cleaving, the rending, the cleaving asunder. This particular word, the verb root F-T-R, that's a ta, not a T. I don't really know how to say that in English, but in Arabic, it's fa-ta-ra. This means to cleave, to break apart. Now, that much is probably obvious, but it's also a verb that means to create. Perhaps another translation of Al-Infitar, at least in this context, would be creative destruction or upending creation. So there is a dividing, an uprooting, a destruction in many ways, combined with a new creation. And it's a great word for the usual dual meaning of the Quran whenever it's talking about this day, the day. Because it's not just the world being upended and redivided, it's people being upended and redivided and recreated, you could say. Now, yes, the earth is being cleaved asunder and made into something entirely new, but so are people. This is the beginning of the new post-resurrection life for people. It's new, it's divided, it's cleaved apart from the old life. And in terms of populations, there's another division and creation taking place, separating the wheat from the chaff, to use biblical language. So you have the physical reality, that cleaving change taking place, and then the personal reality. And on a spiritual level, if you think about it a little bit, this moment can happen to any one individual really at any time. It could be something good, like a conversion experience, or something bad, like an experience that causes you to permanently separate yourself from God. This word, this cleaving, this upending, it's also used in the Quran toward the end of the Surah of Mary, Surah 19, which you're probably familiar with by now if you've been listening for a while. Now, in Surah 19, verse 90, the Quran denounces the idea of God having a son, saying this is a terrible thing. Now, we're not going to get into that. You want to listen to the other part, we could talk about what I think that means and all that. But the key part here is the consequences of it, as the Quran sees this, of God having a son, as in a non-unified God, like kind of in the pagan sense, like Zeus having a son. Who was Zeus' son? I don't even remember. But here it says, using this same word that's in this surah, by which the heavens are about to burst, and the earth to split apart, and the mountains to crumble to pieces. Now again, the subject matter, as we've gone over in some of the Jesus episodes of the Biblical Figures in Islam series, this has more to do with the pagan conception of a son of God than the Christian one. And you see this apocalyptic language because the point being made here, and it's actually a very good point, this is quite correct, that any two gods set against each other would mean a chaotic, topsy-turvy universe. If there were two gods and they went at each other, you could easily expect to see constant changes in the rules of physics and other things, and the heavens would burst, the earth would split apart, and the mountains crumble. The idea of two gods is simply incompatible with a universe that just seems ordered and consistent and constant. And, luckily for the world, we Christians do not believe any of that. We have a single God in perfect relationship with three distinct persons. It's called the mystery of the Trinity for a reason. If it was the pagan version of three gods, we'd just call them our three gods. But the point for this episode is that the same word is being used. It's the greatest sudden change and calamitous chaos you can possibly imagine. Al-Infitar. Now, you'll see something kind of similar in the second line as well, which uses the word for ordered stars within a constellation, Kaukab, rather than just the simple term for stars. Because the concept is the same. The ordered is becoming disordered, or at least brought into a new order, and there's no controlling it. God is the master of this day, and of every day, really. And there is no escape. You're in this, for better or for worse, and forever. Now, you can panic about it, which isn't necessarily bad. If you're panicking about eternity at some point, it means your mind is in the right place, because at least you are acknowledging it. You have a natural understanding of the universe, a Fatari understanding, same root as Al-Infitar. And when the world goes all Fatara, you will be prepared and unsurprised and hopefully unafraid. Thank you, and I'll talk to you next time. Inshallah.